Hi, I'm Mark, and on this channel I talk about UK politics and Brexit from an outside view. Although I do know the UK from the inside as well, as I used to live there for a couple of years, so don't worry. The European Commission has urged the UK to fully implement the existing Brexit agreements relating to Northern Ireland and the rights of EU citizens in the UK in order to improve relations with the EU. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has stressed that his government wants to restore relations with the EU through a comprehensive security agreement and better trading conditions, so he needs goodwill on the other side. Nevertheless, the Commission has set out a series of 8 demands that the British government must meet to demonstrate its commitment to the Brexit agreement. These include that EU citizens do not have to submit a separate application for settled status after 5 years of residence in the UK, and that all existing Brexit agreements, particularly those relating to Northern Ireland, are fully implemented. These demands were presented by EU Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič to the new British Minister for EU Relations, that's Nick Thomas-Symonds, during his first visit to Brussels. After the meeting, both sides stressed their commitment to revitalizing the relationship, though. Nevertheless, the EU remains adamant about compliance with the agreements. They have a lot of experience with British governments here. British announcements of a structured dialogue have met with a muted response from the EU. In addition, the EU Commission is moving forward with a legal measure that has been in place since May 2020, giving the UK 2 months to respond to concerns about the implementation of EU free movement rule before a referral to the European Court of Justice threatens here. Several EU diplomats stress the importance of a thoughtful reorientation of the relationship, though. The Commission raises concerns about the certification of plant and animal products by British authorities and urgently calls for the introduction of a system for checking pets and also new regimes for collecting data on parcels. EU countries with large numbers of citizens in the UK are pushing for better treatment for their nationals who are struggling to find jobs and rent housing due to uncertainty about their residency status. And priorities for the EU include a mobility agreement for young people, the UK's resumption of the Erasmus exchange programme, and access to UK fishing waters after 2026. The UK Cabinet Office has not commented on the leaked information, but stresses its efforts to improve relations with the EU and take positive steps in trade and security. The TCA, negotiated in the wake of Brexit, represents a milestone in relations between the European Union and the UK. It defines what was then the new trading relationship between both sides and sets out extensive obligations for the UK. To benefit from tariff-free preferences, goods must meet certain rules of origin, and this means that a significant proportion of the goods must be produced in the EU or the UK. And the complex rules of origin pose challenges for companies in documenting and tracking flows of goods. Despite tariff-free imports, extensive customs formalities still need to be observed, which can lead to delays and higher costs in cross-border trade. Companies really need to finally familiarize themselves with new IT systems and processes in order to comply with customs formalities. The UK says it's committed to maintaining a high level of social standards and workers' rights to avoid distortions of competition. And this includes, for example, minimum wages, working hours, occupational health and safety, and the right to collective bargaining. And companies must ensure that their business practices are in line with these standards. High standards must also be maintained in the area of environmental protection. This concerns, for example, climate protection, air and water quality, and we talked a lot about this in the UK, and the handling of hazardous substances. And companies must adhere to strict environmental regulations and possibly invest in environmentally friendly technologies. Cooperation in the development of new regulations is of great importance in order to reduce technical barriers to trade and ensure smooth business transactions. Regular discussions between the regulators on both sides would be nice to achieve convergence and minimize discrepancies. The provisions on judicial cooperation are intended to facilitate the fight against crime and protect the rights of citizens on both sides, and this includes mutual recognition of court decisions, extradition of criminals, we talked about this week already, and cooperation in investigations. And fishing rights have been regulated in a separate part of the protocol, which is reviewed annually and regularly leads to tensions between the two sides. The limited catch quotas and complex access rights pose a challenge for fishing companies. And cooperation in the energy sector is of great importance to secure energy supplies and promote the transition to a sustainable energy supply. And this includes trade in energy, the development of joint energy infrastructures, and cooperation in the energy transition. In the event of disputes, both sides can turn to special arbitration courts to find an out-of-court solution. Arbitration proceedings are often lengthy and costly. There's a counsel for this, so to speak. But in certain cases, the European Court of Justice can be called upon to clarify legal issues, and this can lead to further uncertainty and delays. And companies have to spend considerable additional resources on customs clearance and deal with complex customs procedures. And adapting to different norms and standards in both markets requires significant investment and bureaucratic effort. And supply chains needed to be reorganized to meet the new customs regulations and the technical requirements. And this led to higher transport costs and longer delivery times. And traveling between the EU and the UK has become more cumbersome. I talked about the Spanish side, for example, this week. Travelers have to deal with new entry requirements, passport checks, and visa requirements. And students and workers needed to learn about the new rules for the recognition of qualifications and residence permits. And the recognition of professional qualifications can be quite lengthy and bureaucratic. And social security coordination can also lead to uncertainty in the use of social benefits, especially for cross-border workers and pensioners. The TCA is a dynamic treaty that needs to adapt to the changing economic and political environment. That's why we have the review for, but it's only technical review, not a renegotiation. And still, the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol remains a major challenge and carries the risk of political tensions, even with the Windsor Protocol. And the limited market opening for financial services leads to competitive disadvantages for UK financial institutions, especially when the transition period runs out next year. And the new rules on worker mobility make cross-border cooperation more difficult and may lead to a shortage of skilled workers even more. And cooperation in tackling climate change will be a key challenge to achieve climate goals. The EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement has far-reaching implications for businesses, citizens, and relations between both sides. And implementing the agreement is complex and requires significant adjustments. Both the EU and the UK are faced with the task of intensifying cooperation and finding common solutions to the existing challenges. But to fight the challenges of the full agreement, one of the two sides still needs to implement a lot of that TCA, which still hasn't happened, and we will talk about some postponements again and delays in another video this week. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.